What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. We are back with another prediction video today. We're going to go through a bit of a preview for the Georgia-Ireland game. I've been playing quite well as Georgia recently. We are yet to lose a game with them. This might be a bit tougher. Ireland are rated much higher than Georgia in this game, so it might be a little bit tough, but we'll give it a go. We're going to go through some of the teams, what's been announced for the game. There's a lot to talk about. Let's kick this game off. Alrighty, Abzanzadze is going to get us kicked off knowing that Georgia are actually licensed in this game, which is a lot of fun to see from a Tier 2 nation. So, Georgia versus Ireland is coming up. I think before we get into this one, we're going to want to talk about last week. Let's start off with the Ireland team. Ireland versus England was a big game, which unfortunately wasn't as close as I expected it to be. I did feel England really dominated that game, even though Ireland did seem to put out quite a big team. They had a couple of players that are quite low capped and they were hoping to try and do well. England seem to be going through this tournament as if it's a World Cup and just putting out the biggest team they can every single game. And unfortunately, I don't think Ireland were anywhere in that game in particular. One area that stood out for me more than most was their lineouts. Their lineouts weren't very strong. They were also getting beaten in rucks and mauls a lot. There were an awful lot of turnovers happening in this game, and it was a bit of a shame for them. So they have now lost to England. They did manage to beat Wales. It's more than likely they'll come away from a win against Georgia here, but I think with that England-Wales game coming up, it's more likely that England will win that. So it's unlikely that we will be able to see Ireland in the final for this cup, and more than likely they'll go up against whoever comes second in Conference B. So let's take a look at this Ireland team. There's been quite a few changes to this team. Obviously they're going to be playing a Tier 2 nation, so there's going to be an awful lot of shifts up that they want to make. So we'll chuck it on screen for you guys now. So first thing that springs to mind here is the change in the front row. No Cian Healy, no Heffernan. They've swapped out for Beelum and Herring as they're starting at 1 and 2. Probably a good call, get some new boys on, trying to get them a bit more time. The lineup wasn't really working for me in the England-Ireland game, so I'm understanding why the change at hooker is necessary. Porter, I still think, is having a good game. He just needs to keep his discipline. There were a couple of penalties that were going against him, which felt completely unnecessary, that England game. But overall, a very strong front row. They know they're going to come up against a big physical team in Georgia, so they're going to want to try and show off a little bit with some of them. That's why they've made some changes in terms of the lock department. Ian Henderson coming back in instead of Quinn Rue, which is a shame. Quinn Rue has been playing really well, and I think has been deserving that number 4 spot. But Henderson is, a big name to chuck in at number 4. Big, strong lad. He's going to get in the lineouts very well. Jack Ryan is taken over as captain again, because Johnny Sexton, of course, still isn't back from his injury. He actually had not a terrible game against England, but I didn't see a great deal of captaincy leadership from him in the last game. When things were going wrong, he wasn't really running the show per se, but hopefully he can step up a little bit this weekend. And then we've got our 6, 7, 8, Taj Byrne, Will Connors and CJ Stander. That is a big back line there in the front row. I'm going to be very interested to see what these lads can do. Taj Byrne is a fantastic player for turning over the ball and very useful for them. CJ Stander, a huge powerful runner, and Connors just seems to be doing very well in that pick and drive in the 5-metre line. So between the three of them, I think they can actually try and compete with Georgia relatively well in terms of that forward pack game. There's going to be, I think, like most teams trying to do, they're trying to use Georgia as a bit of a test benchmark to see how well their forwards are coping. And I think the way that England managed to play them by literally playing the Georgia game against them, I think Ireland will want to take a similar approach. This is a big forward 8s for them, and I think they're going to want to come in with a bit of passion. They're going to want to come away from this with a win, no doubt, but to try and beat Georgia at their own game, try and strengthen some of their forwards in the process, I think will be a good move for them. Looking at the backs, Connor Murray has taken back over at number 9. There's going to be no Gibson Park, unfortunately. He has in fact not been put in this entire team. Maybe that's to give some other people a bit of a chance, but hopefully we'll get to see him in the future. I actually thought he had a real good game in his first game, and it dipped a little bit against England, but there is a big switch up there to play that England team, especially as a starting scrum half. Connor Murray, of course, is vastly experienced in this game, so I did feel a bit of a shame for Gibson Park, but he will hopefully be able to come back a lot stronger in the future. Billy Burns is having his first start at number 10, which will be a lot of fun for him. He didn't actually play terribly in the games I've seen him in, but he hasn't been able to get a great deal of game time. Obviously Sexton keeping him out of that 10 shirt, with Ross Byrne being able to hold out the number 10 when Sexton isn't there. So hopefully he'll be able to have a good game. I actually don't know who will be doing the kicking between Murray and Burns. I know Conor Murray can do the kicking, but I don't know one where they'll put all the pressure on him as a 10. I think if he wants to actually earn that 10 spot, he's got to take over the kicking duties, but it's not actually certain yet. I did try and find out by checking out some of the press conferences and stuff, but as of yet it hasn't actually been released who will be doing the kicking, but I'm sure they will find out eventually. Let's move on to the centres. McCloskey is coming back in. This is a name I haven't heard in terms of an Ireland jersey in about 4 or 5 years. I don't know what happened to him. He just disappeared off the face of the earth. He's a good centre. But of course that partnership of Bundy Aki and Gary Ringrose has kept him out of either shirt. I'm really looking forward to seeing him back. I'm hoping he'll have a good game against Georgia as well. The Georgia backline doesn't seem to be doing brilliantly defensively. Their forward pack is very strong with that Georgian defensive line in terms of the backs is where they want to be attacking. McCloskey's a hard runner. I think he'll be able to do well. Hopefully we'll have a good game, especially when he's partnered up with Chris Farrell here, who in the picture looks like his neck is as wide as his head. He is a powerful man. We did get to see him quite a lot actually in the England game, trying to do some crash balls. He did a lot of first receiver considering he's 13 rather than a 12, but he is a very strong player and it's nice to see him getting some more game time with Ringrose out. In terms of the wingers, they've switched up again. Ireland every week seem to be trying to switch up this back line. I don't know if this is working for them, trying to pick and choose. They're obviously trying to find where the issues are so that they can try and fix them. However, switching it up this often can be a little bit discouraging for some of the players. So what they've done here is they've moved Keith Earls onto his left wing, when he usually used to play on the right wing. So Keith Earls is going to swap to that left wing. Not a bad position for him, actually. I do like Keith Earls on the left wing. Keenan's going to go from his fullback position. He's going to move into the right wing, where Andrew Conway was. I actually think Andrew Conway picked up an injury in that England game, which is why he's not been brought in for this one. So Keenan's going to be in on the right-hand wing, with, of course, Stockdale coming back off his bench. It was his first game he's been benched in since his debut, or some ridiculous stat like that. So Stockdale gets to come back in at his fullback position. He will know that his position is now actually up for grabs a little bit. Stockdale has been one of the key players in the Ireland team for many years, considering that his first sort of 2 years in the Six Nations of that Ireland jersey, I still believe he is the highest try scorer in a Six Nations in like 1 year. I still think he holds that record. He is a brilliant player. He seems to have lost that ability to do his little interception, run the length of the pitch tries that he was so famous for back in the day. I'm hoping he can have a good game. It'd be nice to see Jacob Stockdale get back to his usual talented ability. He seems to have been lacking a little bit in recent months, really. Even in the Six Nations, he didn't impress superbly, but this Autumn Nation Cup especially, he's been trying to get back into that mode. He has done a couple of press conferences where he's been talking about his mental health, and he hasn't been feeling his game as professionally as he used to. So hopefully he can step up a little bit and get back to the Jacob Stockdale we all know and love. So, moving on to the subs. Who's going to come on and support this Ireland team? Well, they've obviously know they're going up against Georgia. They're going to want some powerful forwards in here. So they have separated it up a little bit. They've gone for the 5 forwards, 3 backs technique. That seems to be what most people have done against Georgia. So, let's check it on screen for you guys. So, Heffernan, Healy and John Ryan going to be coming on. That's going to be a good replacement there. I mean, Keeley and Heffernan have been starting in the starting 15 against the other two teams, which are much more renowned teams for having a powerful team on their side. So I think they'll be able to do very well coming on, especially if they begin to wear down some of those Georgian forwards. Adding in a Heffernan or a Kean Healy will do unspeakable damage in some of those scrums, so hopefully they can have a good game. Quinn Rue will be coming on at some point, I imagine in place of Ian Henderson, seeing as Jack Ryan is captain. I've been very impressed with Quinn Rue, and I'm looking forward to seeing him back on the pitch for a bit. Peter O'Mahony is going to be at number 20. I don't know what position he will actually take. He might actually take over from Connors at some point. I would say he's probably the least sort of capped player in that team, and Peter O'Mahony is a great wealth of experience to bring on at some point. He actually played very well against England, and it was one of the few people that really stood out for me as a very impressive Irish performance. At 21, replacement scrum half, instead of Gibson Park, it is Marmion. So Kieran Marmion is a young scrum half. He hasn't had a lot of game time, so they're obviously trying to diversify it up. I mean, a long time ago, even if you go back a year or two, I think really Conor Murray would be your only choice at scrum half. So Ireland are obviously trying to get a bit of competitiveness for that space, and I think having the choice of 3 different scrum halves to an international level will be very, very useful for them. Ross Byrne's going to be taking over at fly half. I can see him coming on maybe 55, 60 minutes in just to replace Billy Burns. He's coming in for that international scene. He's quite a young lad. I think they'll want Ross Byrne on, who's got a much older head on his shoulders, who'll be able to do a bit more game management. But it'll be nice to see what Billy Burns can do starting at that number 10. And then finally, Daly, who will be making his debut. So I tried to find out a little bit about Daly. I cannot find anywhere which Daly they are on about, so I'm going to assume it's Shane Daly that plays for Munster at the minute. He's a very good winger, so it'll be nice to see him come on. I would imagine he will probably come on for Keenan. Keenan doesn't seem to have done a full 80 minutes yet. I don't know why that is. He seems to have the stamina for it. They just seem to want to put him on as the replacement winger at some point, with Keith Earls is obviously a lot more experienced. Maybe they would try and put him on at fullback and then swap Keenan and Daly around, so Daly will manage to go back on the wing and Keenan would move to fullback to keep Stockdale from having the full 80 minutes. I'm not sure how they're going to work it, but overall is a very powerful Ireland side. I'm expecting this team to come in with a lot of force and be able to get a decent win here. The forward pack especially is looking very strong. I think they know Georgia are going to want a good game. Georgia haven't been the most impressive this tournament, so I think they'll want to target this game to at least try and score some points if they can do. And I think the backline has got enough good strike runners that they should be able to get some tries. I haven't looked up the weather. Hopefully it'll be better than the Wales-Georgia game, so hopefully we'll be able to actually see people run with the ball in hand a little bit as opposed to just forward, sort of charging forward. But speaking of the big forward game, we got to talk about Georgia. So let's have a look at this Georgian team. So the Georgian team is one that I've been trying to learn a lot about myself through this tournament. Georgia weren't that well known to me before this tournament actually started in terms of some of their international players, so it's been fun, especially along with being able to play a bit of Rugby 20 in the background for you guys, getting to learn a few more names and learn who's their sort of main starting 15 in the Georgian team. So thinking back to last week, it was Georgia versus Wales, and Wales came away with that 18-0 win. It felt a very boring game in a lot of senses, but showed a lot of promise, especially for the Wales team, who put on basically a C team and were able to come away with a win there, especially with nilling Georgia. I don't think Georgia will be too happy with that game. They definitely should have come away with some points, and I think one of the key things they'll be aiming for in this game is to at least get some points on the board. I would hate for them to come away from this tournament having scored nothing in all games, considering that they probably won't play Fiji in that final. Fiji games have been cancelled across the board, so I wouldn't be surprised if the Georgian team doesn't actually get to play them. Sure, that'll be a 28-0 win for them and they'll get some points, but that's not really what they want. They want to actually beat a team, especially coming into some of these first-tier nations. So the Georgian team that came out in that Wales game played very well. Actually, the forwards were doing their job, as we all knew they were going to do, but even some of the backs did manage to impress a little bit. The defensive effort on the far wings was quite lacking. There was a chance for Louis Rees-Zammit to actually get like a hat-trick in that game, which I don't think should have been happening. Wales seemed to be desperate to give Zammit a try, and I think Georgia definitely should have picked up on it. So maybe just changing the game plan within game is a little bit off for Georgia. So we'll run through some of the names. It's a pretty standard team from what we've seen so far. Nareyashvili, Mamukiashvili, Gigayashvili is the set three they seem to love at the front. There's been a couple of changes in the locks, and some of the backs have changed up a little bit. Again, I don't know a great wealth of knowledge about the Georgian team, so a couple of names will stand out for me. Gorgadze has actually been named in Team of the Week in for some places as one of the big ball carriers in this Nations Cup, so I've been very nice to see he's getting a bit of recognition for being such a big ball carrier. Lobjanidze is going to be coming back into that number 9. He's going to be keeping Apranzidze out, which is actually out of the team entirely. So it'll be nice to see him coming in. Abjanzadze is their 10. He seems to always be their 10. Again, not a bad 10, but just a little bit more game management. He seems to stand as the first receiver for most of the rucks, especially when they're in their own half, and it does get a little bit questionable. He seems to be very reliant on the scrum half doing box kicks rather than kicking from hand himself, so hopefully he'll be able to have a good game. And then Sharikadze, who seems to be the captain every week, so he must be a standout player for them. There have been a couple of changes further in the centre, like Tupou is no longer playing, who was in there for a couple of games, so they are switching it up a bit. And then Mateyashvili is their fullback, who's actually quite a decent runner, but he doesn't get a lot of time on the ball, and sadly with the weather the way it was in the last game, They weren't able to do a great deal with it. But this Georgian team is as strong as it's been through this tournament. But I think the key thing they're going to want to take away from this game is getting away with some points. I think will be their main factor for this one, but I definitely still think it'll be an Ireland win. My prediction for this game is going to be an Ireland win, and I actually think they've got enough strike runners here to potentially get a good, decent number of tries in. I'm going to say Ireland to win by 25, I think is the way it's going to go. I think it'll be a slow first 20-30 minutes, forwards trying to out-forward each other, and then I think it'll spread out to the backs a little bit. I think they will have watched England and Wales, and they'll know the weaker links seem to be on those wings for Georgia, and they'll definitely want to try and make up as much room as they can on those wings. Get some people some tries in, especially with someone making their debut, or probably coming on the wing at some point. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. I always appreciate people jumping on. If you like this video, make sure you drop it a like and subscribe to the channel just to keep up to date with all of our videos as they're coming out. I hope you've all enjoyed, guys. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.